Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel where we create photorealistic assets together. So per viewer request, I'm finally doing my organic texturing full process video. This is the first part of a 3-part series where I will be focusing on only modeling. The second part will be full texturing process in Mari. And the last part will be full texturing process in Substance Painter. Let's start with the modeling process first. Here is what I have for my sculpting so far. The picture in the corner is my main reference. I love the color on this picture and what this chameleon looks like. Of course, that one is not enough. I have many other references to help as well. This is for the large and secondary form. I do not plan to sculpt any scale here. My plan is to sculpt this to the point I'm happy with it. Bring this into Mari, project the scale in the displacement channel, then bring the finished displacement map back into Zbrush and displace it in Zbrush. Then I will have to clean it up. Inside of Mari, I create a simple displacement channel with 32-bit. This is where I will be projecting my scales for the displacement map. Here are some displacement textures that I found in my texture library. All of them came from Surface Mimic. I have some crocodile texture here and a lot of frog texture. I couldn't find a ready-to-use chameleon texture anywhere. So a few things can happen. One is I will test out what I have and they are actually close enough. All I need to do is just sculpt it a little bit more afterwards. Or none of this texture work and I have to go on the internet to try to find some very high resolution chameleon skin texture and convert them into displacement maps that I can use. To be honest, I only tried it a few times, tried to convert the image I find on the internet into displacement, and I never really had big success with it. If anybody knows any special tricks, please tell me. I would very much love to know. The last option I have is just to straight sculpt the scales. Did I ever mention I'm super slow sculptor? There's a reason why this tutorial come out much later than my other ones. If I really have to sculpt every one of those scales, I don't think this tutorial will come out ever. I would love some tips from the sculptors as well. On the happy notes that my project might be a complete mess, let's do some projection. The first texture I'm testing out is a crocodile texture. It's definitely different than the chameleon skin, but maybe it can give me something. I want to at least look at them in Zbrush first before I say this is not going to work. I want to make sure how the scale is lining up matches the reference. I'm only working on a few big areas for a test. They don't have to be super clean at the moment. I will try to do them as fast as I can. This is what it looks like after some painting. I will export this and do a quick test in Zbrush. After I export the texture from Mari, there's a couple things I have to do in Photoshop first. I set my channel to 32-bit in Mari and I need to convert it to 16-bit first. I can't seem to import 32-bit into Zbrush for displacement. Also, I need to flip the texture upside down. Inside of Zbrush, the UV is still flipped vertically. Maybe there's a technical reason why they kept it this way after so many years. I'm not technical, I don't understand it. Inside of Zbrush, go to the displacement map, click on the map itself and click import. Here it is, the crocodile texture on our chameleon. This is not gonna work. But I do like how the technique totally works. It will actually look pretty good if this is a crocodile. By the way, did I ever mention I've never done this before? This is a learning process for myself as well. Let's give the frog skin texture a try. It's a little bit better. Maybe this one is worth me to keep going and see what I get. It's definitely not terrible, but it will need me to do tons of cleanup after. I will keep going and show you what I have. The tricky part of texturing something like this is the layout of the scale. The shapes and sizes are always changing throughout the body. They have a direction and logic to it. We can't just project one tileable texture and expect it to look natural. We need to have all this variation of scale pattern and lay them out in a very controlled manner. This is when I realized what's available to me, the textures, will not give me the kind of results I need. It is too different from the reference, and the kind of fixes I will have to do, it's probably just gonna be as much as if I sculpt everything myself. So what should I do now? I don't like the other two options. I consulted my awesome texture friend and my boyfriend. They both mentioned that they've seen people having great results creating scales with Substance Designer. That might be a solution for me. I started to learn Substance Designer about a year ago when I had to create some fabric pattern for work. And I haven't really touched it since. Time to rewatch some tutorials and I will show you what I got. I think I figured this out. Here is my designer scene with all the finished scale that I made. I will run through them with you in a minute. As you can see, I made quite a few different scales. After looking at the reference, I know these are the scales I will have to make. These very straight and kind of uniform ones near the mouth. The ones near the eye that looks round and bumpy. These very irregular ones that looks like mostly on the face. And these very distinctive ones with the small round scales and big ones on top. In general, it wasn't too hard to do. I will run through a couple more difficult ones with you. This is definitely a tricky one. I know I have to make two things for this. One is the big bump on top and another one is the small bump underneath. I run through this bumpy shape I made into a tile sampler to create that pattern. You can create this big round shape the same way you create a rock. Then I put the same shape through another tile sampler. Now I have one that's small and busy and another one is bigger. The tricky part here is to make sure that the small ones goes around the big ones and looks like the big ones is embedded inside. What I had to do was connect this one into a level and made a mask out of my big shape. And then put that into my mask map input. So inside of this tile sampler, under color, you will find the mask map threshold. First, I have to invert the map, and then you can use this slider to adjust how you want those smaller scales to lay out. After that is done, I also use the same mask, go through an ambient occlusion node, so I can multiply it on top of the smaller ones and make them appear lower than the big ones. And after that, a blend node to combine them all together. Here I also use a little bit of a breakup to create a little bit more bumpiness on top. And that's how you got this scale. All the other scales are created pretty much the same way, so I will show you one and you should be able to understand all of them. So first you start with the tile sampler. First, to get this shape going, you want to go to the blending mode of your tile sampler and make sure it's set to max. After that, it's just a matter of playing with some offsets. I adjusted position offset. There's some scale random here, and I also tiled X and Y different amounts. Getting to this shape is pretty straightforward. After that, I run it through an edge detect, and I want to fill up those little holes I have. I also run it through an invert grayscale, a blur node, and a histogram scan node. Blend them together, and I filled up those holes with smaller shapes. Right now, this looks pretty flat. I'm running it through non-uniform blur and run through another non-uniform blur together to get some height going. The next thing I did is a warp node to get some irregularity going. I also run it through a cell, another blur node, blend it together. Now I can see a little bit more texture. I also run the pattern through a flood fill node and a flood fill to grayscale. This is a very common procedure for you to get some irregularity in height. I also blurred it a little bit before I combined them all together. At the end, I added another slope blur grayscale to add a little bit more texture. It's really hard to see here, but once I project it, I can see them in my displacement map. Once I prepare all the necessary scales, I'm proceeding to the next step. I'm preparing the geometry for projection in Mari. I'm fixing the UV a little bit to help with the direction of the scale. Once in Mari, I will start to lay out all the correct scales at the right area. Actually, to speed up the process, I decide to just tile everything at the area that's roughly accurate. Then I will go back and fix all the seams. I'm doing a quick test here just to see what it looks like in Zbrush. I think it's working really well. For the underneck area, the scale is clearly different. I'm gonna mask this area out and put a different scale on it. This one looks a little bit more appropriate than the old one. I will keep double checking it in Zbrush and adjust the scale if I have to. I want to show you how I fix the seams here. This is a pretty tedious process. Basically, I will paint one complete scale on top. Then I will use the lattice function in Mari to adjust it to a proper position. This is a very slow process, and that is why making organic things like this takes a lot of time. I basically have to do this all the way along the seams until it's all fixed. We are skipping ahead to after I laid out all the basic textures. This is actually a very decent, nice starting point. Because we customized our scale to what we see in the reference in Substance Designer, I think by the end there will be less sculpting work to do. I'm skipping ahead again to show you the final paint I have on this. I figure there's no need to show you more of those tedious process. It's basically just me patching up the scales using the texture maps. This is the final displacement map that I'm happy with and tested in Zbrush. To keep everything organized, I created backdrops for the different areas. Helps me keep track of where everything should be. This is what the final map looks like in Zbrush. I didn't spend too much time to make sure that every scale is super clean. This is already a long tutorial to make and I didn't want to take any longer. This thing is definitely not perfect, but I think I'm just gonna move on from here. Now we have to do a pass of cleanup in Zbrush. I tried to match all the scales in the displacement map, but in the end, there's definitely a lot of fix we'll have to do in Zbrush as well. This guy has all this very distinct big chunk of scale behind his eye, and I don't really have that on my map. Just gonna sculpt it by hand. There are a lot of artifacts we got from messy painting, and that's unavoidable when you're trying to lattice everything into position. So those are the things that we will need to clean up in Zbrush. The edge of the nose is a little too wobbly. I need to add some definition to it. There is no way around it. Making this kind of organic animal is a slow process, especially for texture artists. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have texture artist friends that are amazing sculptors. I'm going to keep working on this for a little while and show you what I have in the end. This is my final sculpt. I patched up all the seams and tried to create that transition of scales from large to small and also transition into different types of scale. This is definitely not perfect, but I think I'm just going to move on from here and try to texture it. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. In the next video, we will get into the full texturing process in Mari. With what's going on right now, I hope you are staying safe. Since we were forced to be indoors, let's use this time to improve some skills. I will see you in the next one.